Your absence is their proof that you mattered more than they ever admitted. Right now, in this very moment, someone who once dismissed your worth is feeling the emptiness where your energy used to be. They're checking your name in their contacts. They're wondering what you're doing. They're creating stories about why you're no longer available to them. And that, my friend, is the most powerful validation you'll ever receive. But here's what I want to know from you. Raise your hand if you've ever had someone in your life who made you question your own value. Keep it up if that person suddenly became very interested in you the moment you stopped being available to them. Look around. Look at those hands. You're not alone in this experience, and you're certainly not crazy for noticing the pattern. The truth is this: narcissists are like emotional metal detectors. They can sense value from miles away. When they first encountered you, something in your spirit, your energy, your authentic self, sent out a signal that said, "This person has something I need." They didn't choose you randomly. They chose you because you possessed qualities they lacked: genuine warmth, real empathy, natural creativity, authentic confidence, or simply the ability to love without conditions. Think about a farmer who spends months preparing soil. He tests the pH levels, adds nutrients, removes rocks and weeds. He doesn't plant his most valuable seeds in poor soil. He saves the good seed for the rich ground. You were the rich ground. Your capacity for love, your willingness to see the best in others, your ability to forgive and try again. These weren't weaknesses they exploited. These were treasures they desperately needed. But somewhere along the way, you started believing their version of your story. Maybe they convinced you that your kindness was naivety. Perhaps they labeled your emotional depth as too sensitive. They might have called your authenticity dramatic, or your boundaries selfish. Slowly, methodically, they rewrote your internal narrative until you began seeing yourself through their diminished lens. I knew a woman named Sarah who spent 3 years in a relationship with a man who criticized everything about her. Her laugh was too loud. Her dreams were unrealistic. Her friends were a bad influence. Her family was too involved. Her work wasn't important enough. Her appearance needed constant improvement. For 3 years, she shrunk herself smaller and smaller, trying to become the person he claimed he wanted. Then, one Tuesday morning, something shifted. She was making coffee and realized she hadn't really laughed, in months. She couldn't remember the last time she'd called her sister just to talk. She'd stopped painting, stopped going to her favorite bookstore, stopped wearing the bright colors she loved. She looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the person staring back. That was her turning point. Not a dramatic confrontation or a final straw moment, just a quiet recognition that she'd become a stranger to herself. Within 2 weeks, she'd ended the relationship. She didn't argue her case or try to make him understand. She simply said, "This isn't working for me anymore," and walked away. The response was immediate and telling. The man who had spent 3 years cataloging her flaws suddenly had a very different perspective. He bombarded her with messages about how much he missed her laugh. He sent flowers with notes about how beautiful she was. He called her friends, asking them to convince her to come back. He showed up at her workplace. He promised to change, to be better, to appreciate her properly. But here's what Sarah realized. His sudden appreciation wasn't about love. It was about supply. She had been his source of energy, validation, and emotional regulation. Her attention had been the fuel that kept his fragile self-image running. When she removed that fuel, his entire system began to malfunction. This is the universal principle at work. What we resist in others often reveals what we most need to reclaim in ourselves. Sarah had spent 3 years resisting his criticism, his control, his attempts to diminish her life. What she needed to reclaim was her own voice, her own joy, her own unshakable sense of worth. Now let me ask you something, and I want you to really think about this. When was the last time you made a decision based purely on what felt right to you, without considering how someone else might react? When did you last speak your truth without editing it for someone else's comfort? When did you last take up space in a room without apologizing for your presence? If you're struggling to answer those questions, You're not broken. You've simply been conditioned to believe that your worth depends on external approval. This conditioning often starts early. Maybe you grew up in a household where love felt conditional. Perhaps you learned that being good meant keeping others happy, even at your own expense. You might have internalized the message that your needs were less important than everyone else. But consciousness is like the dawn. Once light begins to break, darkness cannot return to its former strength. The moment you recognize that your worth is not negotiable, not dependent on another person's opinion, and certainly not contingent on someone else's ability to appreciate you, everything changes. Your energy field shifts. Your body language transforms. Your voice carries new authority. You start making different choices. You begin attracting different people. This isn't mystical thinking, it's practical spirituality. Like attracts like on every level of existence. When you operate from genuine self-worth, manipulative people feel uncomfortable around you. They can sense that their usual tactics won't work. Your boundaries aren't defensive walls built from fear. They're clear property lines, marked with confidence. You don't need to fight or argue or prove your point. You simply become unavailable for treatment that doesn't match your value. This is when narcissists reveal their true nature. When their manipulation stops working, when their criticism doesn't land, when their emotional blackmail falls flat, they experience something foreign: consequences. Your absence becomes a mirror, reflecting back their own emptiness. They feel the void where your energy used to be, and it's uncomfortable because they've never learned to fill that space themselves. Watch for these signs that someone is feeling the weight of your absence. They start speaking about you to mutual friends, often positioning themselves as the victim. They create elaborate stories about why the relationship ended, always casting you as the problem. They monitor your activities obsessively, checking your social presence, asking others about your life. They send random messages, sometimes angry, sometimes apologetic, always designed to provoke a response. They might show up in places they know you'll be. They could suddenly become interested in your hobbies or friends. They may even attempt to make you jealous by highlighting their new relationships or achievements. All of this behavior has one purpose: to get your attention back on them. Your absence has created a deficit in their emotional supply, and they're scrambling to fill it. But you must understand something crucial: your attention is currency. Your emotional energy is a finite resource. Your time and focus are investments. For too long you've been spending these precious assets on people who were draining your account without making any deposit. Soil that's been depleted by the wrong crops needs time to restore its nutrients. You don't immediately plant new seeds in exhausted ground. You let it rest. You add the right nutrients. You protect it from further depletion. Your spirit operates the same way. After investing your energy in someone who didn't value it, you need time to replenish yourself. This restoration period isn't about becoming bitter or building walls. It's about remembering who you were before someone else's dysfunction clouded your vision. It's about reconnecting with your own voice, your own instincts, your own dreams. It's about standing in front of the mirror and recognizing the person looking back as someone worthy of respect, kindness, and genuine love. The most powerful thing you can do is live as if your worth is a settled matter, not something you need to prove or defend or negotiate. When you move through the world with this quiet confidence, you naturally repel those who would diminish you and attract those who see your value clearly. Your presence carries weight because your absence leaves a void. The people who recognize this truth are the ones worth your time. The ones who only notice your value when it's gone are showing you everything you need to know about their character and your own power. This recognition of your irreplaceable worth isn't the end of the story. It's the foundation upon which everything else is built. Because once you truly understand your value, you begin to see the patterns that govern all human relationships, the cycles that repeat until we learn to break them, and the predictable ways people behave when their source of supply is removed. Human behavior follows patterns as predictable as the seasons. Spring always follows winter. High tide is always followed by low tide. And narcissistic manipulation always follows the same three-phase cycle: idealization, devaluation, and understanding this pattern isn't just academic knowledge, it's your roadmap to freedom. Who here has experienced the whirlwind romance, phase with someone who later became your biggest critic? Raise your hand if you've had someone shower you with excessive attention and praise early on, only to systematically tear you down later. Keep your hand up if this same person became desperate to get you back the moment you tried to leave. This is the pattern, and it's as reliable as gravity. During idealization, you become their everything. They love bomb you with attention, gifts, promises, and declarations of how perfect you are together. You're their soulmate, their missing piece, their answer to everything. This phase feels intoxicating because it mirrors your own capacity for genuine love and connection. You think you've found someone who matches your emotional depth, but idealization isn't love, it's projection. They're not seeing you as a complete human being with flaws, needs, and your own agenda. They're seeing you as a source of supply, a solution to their internal emptiness, a prop in their personal drama. The moment you display independence, set a boundary, or fail to meet their unrealistic expectations, the mask begins to slip. Devaluation creeps in slowly at first. Maybe they make a joke at your expense that doesn't feel funny. Perhaps they compare you unfavorably to someone else. They might start questioning your decisions or criticizing your appearance. What once made you perfect suddenly becomes evidence of your inadequacy. Your sensitivity becomes too emotional. Your independence becomes selfish. Your success becomes threatening. This phase is designed to break down your confidence and make you doubt your own perceptions. They want you confused, walking on eggshells, constantly trying to get back to that initial paradise they showed you. You start modifying your behavior, sacrificing your needs, and losing yourself in the process of trying to please someone who has no intention of being pleased. Then comes discard, sometimes sudden, sometimes gradual. They might find new supply and simply disappear. They could manufacture a crisis that positions them as the victim. Sometimes they just become so cruel that you're forced to leave. For your own sanity, the person who once called you their everything now treats you like you're nothing. But here's what most people don't understand. This cycle only works if you participate in it. Your response to each phase determines whether the pattern continues or breaks entirely. When you react from emotion, whether that's desperate attempts to regain their approval during devaluation or chasing them during discard, you're feeding the cycle. Think of it like building a house. If you build on shifting sand, every storm will damage your foundation. You'll spend all your time and energy on repairs, never actually creating the stable home you want. But when you build on solid rock, the storms may come, but your foundation holds firm. Your inner foundation is your sense of self-worth, your boundaries, your values, and your connection to your own truth. When this foundation is solid, manipulation tactics bounce off you like rain off a roof. You don't need to fight or argue or prove your point. You simply don't participate in dynamics that don't serve you. Sarah, from our earlier story, experienced this firsthand. After she left that relationship, her ex went through the predictable pattern of trying to win her back. First came the hoovering attempts, sudden declarations of love, promises to change, gifts, showing up at her workplace. When that didn't work, he moved to guilt manipulation, telling her how much he was suffering, how she was being cruel and heartless. The old Sarah would have felt terrible. She would have questioned whether she was being too harsh. She might have given him another chance, just to stop feeling guilty. But the new Sarah had spent months rebuilding her foundation. She understood that his emotional state was not her responsibility. His promises meant nothing, because his actions had already shown her who he was. When guilt didn't work, he escalated to anger and threats. He spread rumors about her to mutual friends. He showed up at places he knew she'd be. He sent long messages detailing everything wrong with her character. This is the extinction burst, the final desperate attempt to regain control through any means necessary. Most people get scared during this phase, and either fight back or give in. Both responses give the manipulator what they want: your emotional energy and attention. Sarah did neither. She documented the harassment for legal purposes, but didn't engage emotionally. She didn't defend herself to mutual friends, or try to set the record straight. She simply continued building her new life. Within 6 months, the harassment stopped. He found new supply and moved on to his next victim. Sarah's refusal to participate in the drama made her an unviable source of emotional fuel. She had successfully broken the cycle by changing her response pattern. This is the spiritual law at work. When you change your inner state,
Your outer world must reorganize to match. You cannot remain the same person internally and expect different external results. The chaos in your life is often a reflection of the chaos in your mind and heart. Think about the people in your life right now, who brings drama wherever they go, who always has a crisis that requires your immediate attention, who makes you feel drained and depleted after spending time with them. These individuals are attracted to your energy because you allow them to be. But when you strengthen your inner foundation, when you become clear about your values and unwavering in your boundaries, these people naturally fall away. They don't consciously choose to leave. They simply find your energy field incompatible with their dysfunction. You stop being a viable source of supply for their emotional needs. I want you to think about this. How many times have you found yourself explaining your feelings to someone who clearly didn't care about them? Raise your hand if you've ever spent hours crafting the perfect message to make someone understand how they hurt you. Keep it up if you later realized that person knew exactly what they were doing and simply didn't care.
This is reactive behavior, responding to someone else's actions with the hope of changing their behavior. It never works because you cannot love someone into loving you back. You cannot explain yourself into being valued. You cannot set enough boundaries to make a person respect you if they fundamentally don't want to. Responsive behavior is different. It's making decisions based on your own values and needs, rather than trying to manage someone else's reaction. It's saying no because something doesn't feel right to you, not because you're trying to teach someone a lesson. It's walking away because you deserve better, not because you're trying to make someone chase you. When you operate from response rather than reaction, you stop giving your power away. You're no longer at the mercy of someone else's moods, decisions, or behavior. You become the author of your own experience rather than a character in someone else's drama. The builders know something important. You cannot construct a stable structure while the ground is still shaking. If you're constantly reacting to someone else's chaos, you'll never have the stability needed to build the life you actually want. You have to create solid ground first. This means developing daily habits that strengthen your connection to yourself. Morning meditation that centers your energy before you encounter other people's agendas. Evening reflection that helps you process experiences without taking on other people's emotions. Physical exercise that keeps you grounded in your body rather than lost in mental spirals. It means learning to distinguish between your feelings and other people's feelings. Empaths often absorb emotions from their environment and mistake them for their own. When you're around someone who's anxious, you feel anxious. When someone's angry, you feel responsible for fixing it. This emotional porousness makes you an easy target for manipulation, because your emotional state becomes dependent on external circumstances. But when you know where you end and others begin, when you can feel compassion without taking on responsibility for emotions that aren't yours, you become much harder to manipulate. Your emotional state becomes internally generated rather than externally dependent. Watch what happens to the manipulative people in your life when you stop reacting to their provocations. When they can't get an emotional response from you, they either escalate temporarily and then move on to easier targets, or they're forced to interact with you in healthier ways. The goal isn't to become cold or disconnected. It's to become so secure in your own worth that you don't need other people's validation to feel complete. When you reach this state, you naturally attract people who also operate from security rather than neediness. This transformation doesn't happen overnight. It requires daily commitment to choosing response over reaction, internal validation over external approval, and your own truth over other people's comfort. But every time you make this choice, you strengthen the foundation that will support the extraordinary life you're meant to live. Your morning sets the tone for everything that follows. How many of you check your phone within the first 10 minutes of waking up? Raise your hand if the first thoughts entering your mind each day come from someone else's agenda rather than your own intentions. Keep it up if you've noticed that this habit leaves you feeling reactive and scattered before your day even begins. What you do in the first hour of your day determines whether you're operating from your center or getting pulled into other people's chaos. When you immediately consume other people's thoughts, problems, and energy, you're essentially handing over the remote control of your emotional state before you've even had a chance to establish your own frequency. Instead, Create a morning practice that anchors you in your own worth before you encounter anyone else's opinion of you. This doesn't require hours of elaborate rituals. 5 minutes of conscious breathing while setting an intention for your day. 3 minutes of writing down what you're grateful for and what you're committed to creating. 2 minutes of looking in the mirror and speaking to yourself with the same kindness you'd show a beloved friend. These simple acts may seem insignificant, but they're actually revolutionary. You're training your mind to generate its own sense of worth, rather than seeking it from external sources. You're establishing your emotional baseline from internal stability, rather than external validation. The farmer doesn't plant seeds and then abandon the field. He waters consistently, removes weeds as they appear, and protects the growing crops from harsh weather. Your self-worth requires the same consistent tending. Every morning you choose to start from your own center rather than other people's chaos. You're watering the seeds of unshakable confidence. But morning practices alone aren't enough if you spend the rest of your day engaging in self-sabotaging behaviors that invite toxic treatment. How many times this week have you said yes when you meant no? How often have you explained or defended decisions that weren't up for debate? When did you last apologize for taking up space or having me? These seemingly small behaviors send signals to everyone around you about how you expect to be treated. When you consistently prioritize other people's comfort over your own truth, you teach them that your feelings don't matter. When you over-explain your boundaries, you signal that they're negotiable. When you apologize for having standards, you invite people to pressure you into lowering them. There's a profound difference between victim mentality and sovereign mentality, and it shows up in every conversation, every decision, every interaction. The victim asks, "Why is this happening to me?" The sovereign asks, "What is this teaching me and how do I want to respond?" The victim says, "I have no choice." The sovereign says, "I don't like my options, but I'm choosing the best one available." The victim makes decisions from fear. What if they get angry? What if they leave? What if they don't like me anymore? The sovereign makes decisions from self-respect. What choice honors my values? What decision serves my highest good? What response reflects who I'm committed to being? When someone treats you poorly, the victim mentality asks, "What did I do wrong? How can I fix? How can I make them happy again?" The sovereign mentality acknowledges, "This person's behavior is telling me everything I need to know about their character, and nothing about my worth." I knew a man named David who transformed his entire life by changing one simple habit. For years he'd been the person everyone called when they needed something. His phone buzzed constantly with requests for favors, loans, advice, and emotional support. He prided himself on being helpful, but he noticed he was exhausted, resentful, and attracting increasingly demanding people. His turning point came when he realized he'd been operating from fear disguised as kindness. He wasn't helping people because he genuinely wanted to. He was helping because he was afraid they wouldn't like him if he said no. His generosity was actually a form of emotional manipulation, trying to purchase love and approval through service. David implemented one rule: every request for his time or energy had to sit for 24 hours before he responded. Not because he wanted to be difficult, but because he needed space to distinguish between genuine desire to help and fear-based people-pleasing. The results were immediate and revealing. Half the people stopped asking when they realized they couldn't get instant gratification from him. The remaining relationships improved dramatically because his help became genuine rather than obligatory. His energy levels increased, his resentment disappeared, and he started attracting people who valued him rather than used him. This is the compound effect in action. One small change in how David responded to requests created massive shifts in the quality of his relationships, his energy levels, and his overall life satisfaction. Your daily choices work the same way. Every time you choose self-respect over people-pleasing, you're compounding interest on your self-worth. But what happens when you slip back into old patterns? Because you will. Change isn't a straight line, and setbacks are part of the process. The difference between people who transform their lives and those who stay stuck isn't the absence of setbacks. It's how quickly they recognize what's happening and course correct. When you notice you've fallen back into reactive behavior, don't waste energy beating yourself up. That's just another form of self-sabotage. Instead, ask yourself, What was I feeling right before I abandoned my boundaries? What need was I trying to meet through this old behavior? How can I meet that need in a way that honors my worth? Maybe you were feeling lonely and settled for attention from someone who doesn't respect you. The need for connection is valid, but the method was self-defeating. How could you meet your need for connection through people who see your value clearly? Maybe you were feeling uncertain and sought validation through people-pleasing. The need for security is understandable, but external validation creates more insecurity, not less. How could you generate that sense of security from within? Your evening practice becomes just as important as your morning routine. Before you sleep, review your day honestly. Where did you honor your worth? Where did you abandon it? What triggered your old patterns? What helped you stay centered? This isn't about judgment, it's about awareness. You cannot change patterns you don't recognize. Write down 3 things you're proud of from the day, even if they seem small. Maybe you didn't respond to a manipulative text. Perhaps you spoke up in a meeting instead of staying silent. You might have chosen to go to bed early instead of staying up scrolling mindlessly. These victories matter because they're evidence that you're becoming someone who values herself. Also, write down 1 thing you'll do differently tomorrow, not 10 things. That's overwhelming. 1 specific behavior you'll change. Maybe you'll take 3 deep breaths before responding to any request. Perhaps you'll ask yourself, is this my problem to solve, before jumping into rescue mode. You might commit to speaking your truth in one conversation you've been avoiding. Physical care is spiritual practice, disguised as mundane activity. When you exercise regularly, eat nourishing food, get adequate sleep, and dress in ways that make you feel confident, you're sending yourself and everyone around you a clear message. This person is worth caring for. Your body language changes, your energy shifts, and people respond differently to you. This isn't about vanity or perfectionism. It's about honoring the vessel that carries your spirit through this work. When you treat your body with respect, you naturally expect others to treat you with respect too. When you neglect your physical needs, you unconsciously signal that you're not a priority, and others will treat you accordingly. Energy management becomes crucial when you understand that your attention is your most valuable resource. Who gets access to your thoughts? What conversations do you engage in? Which environments do you choose to spend time in? Every choice either adds to your energy account or depletes. Start paying attention to how you feel after interactions with different people. Some people leave you feeling energized, inspired, and more like yourself. Others leave you feeling drained, confused, or somehow diminished. This isn't about judging people as good or bad. It's about recognizing which relationships support your highest self and which ones pull you toward your lowest impulses. Create firm boundaries around your energy. This might mean limiting time with certain people, changing the subject when conversations become toxic, or simply removing yourself from environments that consistently bring out your worst qualities. Remember, you're not responsible for other people's feelings about your boundary. You're only responsible for maintaining them. The spiritual principle operating here is simple. Your outer world reflects your inner world with mathematical precision. When you consistently choose self-respect over people-pleasing, you attract people who respect you naturally. When you operate from abundance rather than scarcity, you create more abundance in your life. When you treat yourself as irreplaceable, others begin to see your irreplaceable value too. But this transformation requires urgency without panic. Starting tomorrow isn't good enough, because tomorrow never comes. Starting when you feel ready isn't realistic, because change always feels uncomfortable at first. Starting today in this moment, with whatever small step is available to you, that's how extraordinary lives are built. Tonight before you sleep, I want you to do 3 specific things. First, write down the name of one person whose opinion of you has too much power over your decisions. Commit to making your next choice involving this person, based on your values rather than their approval. Second, identify one request or demand on your time that you've been avoiding addressing. Decide right now whether it serves you or depletes you, and respond accordingly tomorrow. Third, set your phone aside for the last hour before bed, and spend that time in your own thoughts, rather than consuming other people's content. These aren't dramatic gestures, they're small acts of self-sovereignty that compound into life-changing transformation. Because the truth we started with remains unchanged. Your absence creates a void that cannot be filled. But now you understand that this void isn't evidence of other people's need for you. It's proof of your own irreplaceable worth. The narcissists in your life
will always reveal your value through their desperate attempts to regain your attention when you withdraw it. But you no longer need their validation to know what you're worth. You've built an internal foundation so solid that external storms cannot shake it. You've become someone who values herself so completely that only people capable of genuine love can access your energy. What would your life look like if you truly believed you were irreplaceable? Not because someone else told you so, but because you've done the daily work of honoring your own worth. That life isn't a distant possibility. It's what happens when you start treating yourself like the treasure you've always been. And that transformation begins tonight, with whatever small step your heart is calling you to take.